test and see if it works in just a moment. Okay. Well, as you see, it's your discipline is a piece of the learning puzzle where you fit. My original title was more of academic jargon, because that's what I feel I'm good at. I'm really good at that, which was it's basically cross-curricular memetics. The idea behind this is going to be how to draw in other disciplines to help you teach your content and how you can support them as well. It should be beneficial to all involved. I hope to show you a little bit of why that would be the case. Now, elementary teachers are going to find that this is going to be probably relatively easy for them to implement with a little bit of planning, because you have more control over all subjects. Secondaries, it might wind up being a little more difficult just as far as coordinating with other instructors, possibly departmental heads, and we'll get into more of that as we go through. So, without further ado, you'll notice I borrowed some clips off of YouTube there and set some actual depression era music. And that's going to play this because I'm going to use the Great Depression kind of as my model for how all these different disciplines would work within it. That's going to include science, and include English, and so on and so forth. Okay. We'll say goodbye to FDR there. Okay, so what tools do we have in our toolbox to drive content understanding and to drive schema, something that we've all heard at one time or another. And one of the things we talk about here are memes. So what are memes? We're going to focus on definition number 1. And I tell you now, don't worry. My slides are not going to normally be wordy. Okay, but I do want to get the definition out here. So an element of culture or system of behavior that may be considered to pass from one individual to another by non-genetic means. Okay? So in other words, black hair is super popular, and maybe that's what's considered attractive. And from a genetic standpoint, all of a sudden you wind up with a lot of good-looking people with black hair as it goes down the line. Second one is probably more what you're familiar with, memes. That is not what we're talking about today. You can do this. This is funny, by the way. Put Mentos in the ice cubes, and they will explode the soda later on that night. So enjoy. And for my Star Wars fans, this is another type of meme that we're not going to be delving into. Again, popular and funny and so on and so forth. But what memes do, the reason that something like this would be considered humorous is because it is understood by society as a whole, and that's where the comedy comes from, because it becomes like this inside joke depending on what meme you're choosing. So, man, controller of the universe. Is anyone here familiar with this mural at all?
I saw it yesterday.
You did, didn't you? Okay, so Controller of the Universe was a very famous mural by Diego Rivera, originally started in 1932 at Rockefeller Center. Okay, that tells me a little bit about this painting. I could dig in a little more and go, well, what's the artistic value behind it? What's its expression? What's this painting telling me? If I was an art student, right? But what would help me a lot more? Maybe take a look at the whole thing. And that's kind of the holistic viewpoint I want to drive home here today. Because there's a lot in here that even bleeds into what we're talking about when it comes to the Great Depression. I'm going to try the laser pointer to see. Here we go. So, 1934, this is completed in Mexico City. After it was the first attempt at doing this, was destroyed, like I said, at Rockefeller Center. Now, what do you see here? It was destroyed, by the way, because Diego Rivera got to Lenin. And you have to understand that at the time of the Great Depression, communism in America started becoming a little more at the forefront, still small group-wise, but they were really getting behind a lot of the food riots, calls for jobs, and so on and so forth. So Rockefeller saw Lenin, full panic attack, stopped painting. Diego said, no, it's part of my vision kind of a thing, sided with his assistants and workers, and that was the end of that mural, at least in the U.S. So what do we see in the painting that tells us more about what's going on, about the artist himself? Well, if we go over here, there's Lenin, you got Marx, Trotsky, you have the May Day Revolution, This was a Soviet, part of the Soviet turning of the tide into communism. Those are heavy, heavy themes. But if you didn't know your history, you wouldn't get anything out of this in this piece of art. So to understand art, you need the history. And you probably need some of the history, or some of the art to understand the history as well, back and forth. Also, you have a call, we're here to science, which was direct action. That's the main part of this, is control the universe. Basically, we're supplanting the natural order by, understanding it and making adjustments. So over here, you have a little call out to Charles Darwin. You have a proconsul, humanity's beginnings. It's evolution right there, and that's still the hot topic. The Scopes trial going on in the U.S. at that time. Okay, that was the monkey trial, very famous, teaching evolution in schools. You also have here's Zeus. He's wearing a cross around his neck. This represents how Christianity and modern religion as a whole supplanted the old classical religions. That's a good concept. But now, in his vision, science is supplanting that. Beginnings of understanding agriculture, okay, and the conservation movement that started out of the Great Depression in general, as the fields started to lay barren. And then up here, the negative aspect of technology and understanding. This is the scene out of World War I, and you'll note the gas masks, because chemical warfare was just introduced in World War I, and things like mustard gas and so on were actually incorrigible, later became outlawed even in war. So, how does this tie in? Well, Next Generation Science Standards framework, right? They give us this little blurb, and it's beautiful academic jargon here. Cross-cutting concepts have value because they provide students with connections and intellectual tools that are related across different areas of disciplinary content and enrich their application practices and their understanding of core ideas. That sounds fantastic. I see that, and I'm excited. What are the important pieces? If I'm going to pull something out of it, I'm going to say cross-cutting concepts have value. Absolutely. I agree all day long. Yeah, cross-cutting concepts have value with the connections of disciplinary core ideas. That makes a lot of sense to me. Like I said, I'm excited. But what's the catch here? Well, we need to define something. What are disciplinary core ideas? Because without knowing what this is, it's going to fall kind of flat, right? So, if I look at the framework, by digging more into the framework that Next Generation Science Standards gave me, what do we see? Well, I see physical sciences, life sciences, earth and space sciences, engineering, technology, and application of science. And I saw a missed opportunity. And I just kind of went, just like that, because they were so close. They were there. They had it. And they kind of gave it away because they stayed within a little bubble. If we look at it a little further, we'll see that this was another little piece that I thought was exciting and important. Repetition in different contexts will be necessary to build familiarity. Now, it is important to note that they made a good point not to differentiate this from rote memorization and regurgitation. That's not what they were trying to say here. They were talking about repetition of concepts within the sciences. I want to broaden that. I think that to start, we can broaden that. Further in the framework, cross-cutting concepts by repeating, so that these concepts become common and familiar touchstones across the disciplines and grade levels. That's the key. It's the touchstones. We want to have something that these kids are coming back to going, I know a little bit about that. And I learned a little bit about it from my science class. And then I learned a little bit in my history class. And in my math class. I learned how to fit in. We have to find a way. So, let's imagine my puzzle theme. Okay, hope you like it. Let's imagine you have a student. And they go into a history class. Okay? You were the history teacher, correct? Okay, they're in your class. You're going to do the Great Depression. Okay? Important pieces. Well, the Dust Bowl itself, right? So we're going to cover that. 1929 is a big year. Market crash kind of really signaled that this was going to be bigger than maybe somebody like Henry Ford would have thought in the first place. Hoover didn't expect it to be such an order of magnitude of a depression. And these financial issues were coming, nothing like when it hit Wall Street, though. FDR's tree army. This in and of itself, you'll find, is important simply because during the early 1930s, mid-1930s, all throughout, really, what did you have going on? We were talking about internationally. What was going on? You had fascists building private armies. Mussolini was doing it. They were Franco in Spain. He was doing it. Adolf Hitler doing it. So this is the majority. When FDR said, "Hey, let's have a civilian conservation corps," okay, and people said, "Oh, it's his army, the boys in green. It's his tree army," and he actually kind of wrapped his arms around it, which is kind of neat. Good neighbor policy. Basically, we're not going to bother anybody else if they're not bothering us. I would like to see more of that today, so you can bring in some current events there. But that was part of our policy. But there's also a hidden danger in the good neighbor policy, and that was isolationism, which we later saw in Japan in World War II. And that also can be dangerous. But to go along with the tree army, you got to talk about John Muir. John Muir's speeches and paintings set the stage for conservation, understanding nature in a holistic way. He set the stage. He did a lot, and he influenced policy. He palled around with FDR. That's interesting. Of course, FDR himself. You know, a lot of great stories there. Hiding his, he had disability with his legs, and he hid that for some time because he felt people weren't going to elect a cripple, half a man, as they said. Hoover. Read Hoover's policies, and they're incredibly interesting. In fact, at the time of the Great Depression, do you know that the United States was the only industrial country in the world who had no national federal relief system for its workers or elderly? Only one. Okay, agrarian nations aside, industrial nations were the only one. Hoover didn't change that. WPA, another work movement, much like the Civilian Conservation Corps, had to do other pieces to it too. And of course, the New Deal as a whole. Those are all big items that you would tackle in your history class. Okay? So, there's history. But now I'm the student. I'm walking down the hall. And I'm going down to, it could be this week, it could be next week. Don't panic about that. Go to science class. Well, there's my full puzzle again. Yep, I already took history. So I kind of got an idea of what's going on in the 1930s. So I'm on biology. I'm going to teach a section on conservation biology. Okay? So what am I going to cover? Nitrogen fixation. How does that tie into the Great Depression? Well, the way people farmed at the time was tear up the ground, plant the same crops over and over again. And it was monoculture. It was just cycle and cycle. And what they did is they ripped up all the fungus that would fixate the nitrogen in the atmosphere to the roots of the plants for them to grow. And once you destroy that, guess what happens? Plants don't grow. So that's important. And what a great way to make what was going on with the Dust Bowl important. Now you understand why all of a sudden you had all this prior good soil blowing away with the wind there. Permaculture, okay, which is the answer to that. In other words, how do I have sustainable agriculture? The dangers of runoff. How to conserve. What is conservation? Kids need to know what's going on here and how we weren't doing it and how the policies changed in the 30s. You're not talking about science, funding for research and so on and so forth. This is important. This is an important concept. Ecosystems. Again, we're back to that holistic view. How does it all work? For the longest time, and Aldo Leopold actually had mentioned it in his speech, but how do you go through the environment and go, this is useful and that's not useful? So, we want to make sure that our cows are all healthy and good. So the way we do that is we make sure there's not wolves taking them down. So let's exterminate the predators. That disrupts the ecosystem. And that's a myopic vision, and it flies in the face of how we define what's useful and what's not useful. And that's important. And that comes out of understanding ecosystems and food webs and so on and so forth. That wasn't happening during the 30s. Thomas Malthus, population dynamics, that's going to be in your conservation biology curriculum. Erosion, which kind of led back into the nitrogen fixation. But again, the erosion. Soil's gone now. Can't plant anything. You have the whole Midwest laying fallow. It's useless. And then desertification, which is what happened. And we're seeing it now again. You're seeing it in Texas. California is on the cusp of it because their drought is horrific out there. And when you go throughout the Midwest, you kind of see it again too. So now I got a better view of the picture. What's going on behind? What does all this mean? What is it? So here we are. That's what it looked like before a student comes to those two classes. But I've gone to history and I've gone to science. So I'm going to go to English. And English plays an integral role here because it's in English literature that you can tell the stories of and from the time. Okay, and that's what's important. How do you put a human face to all that jargon? I mean, without understanding how it's affecting people, or because that's what English literature is, right? It's people pouring out their emotions, telling stories that are important, and so on. So, right there, Tom Joad, The Grapes of Wrath, right? Great story. I mean, it can really be nonfiction, and the movie is something you should watch every Thanksgiving. I'm a big fan. It reminds you of how lucky you really are. Sinclair Lewis, It Can't Happen Here. This is the other side of the coin. Okay? When you're talking about the New Deal and you're talking about workers' rights and so on, you're going to get this. This book. It's a great book. But it shows you the fears behind giving government too much power and looking at totalitarianism. Okay? Thinly veiled as communism here. But there are a few key differences, so I'll call it totalitarianism. You had Langston Hughes, his poetry. This would not have been written. A new song would not have been written if it weren't for the Great Depression and the growing unrest for food and work, jobs. People want a job. They want to work. They want the feeling of, who am I then? This unabashedly red proletariat writing right here. He later backed off a lot of his communist leanings, but this is a big part of understanding why people were frustrated. And not only that, but if you look at a lot of the pictures, you might have seen some of the video. You know, you think of, the 30s, it was before desegregation and stuff, and you know what? They were black and white side by side, both scrounging for something to eat. That's kind of the core of some of those ideas. It's more looking for that equality. Okay? That's key. Brave New World. Again, fears. It's fears of totalitarianism, control. This is Jack Conroy's, it is a gossamer bit of fiction. It actually wasn't supposed to be fiction. This Inherited was a story about the American workers and their basically fall from grace, you could say, after the booming Ford years. And it was so depressing, and they felt because it was so depressing that it was almost political, the publishers had said that they're only would publish this book if he reclassified it, they allowed them to reclassify it as fiction rather than the nonfiction he had originally wanted. But that tells you something. And that means nothing if you don't understand the context. And again, those memes at the time. What was popular, what wasn't popular. Aldo Leopold, one of my favorites. Stand County Almanac. You're not even allowed to read this book inside. You have to sit outside and read this book, or you won't get it. It's beautiful. Probably one of the real first true leaders in the conservation movement. But again, it plays back to that science class, doesn't it? And it certainly plays back to the history class. Okay? National policy on the park systems, okay, FDR, again, wouldn't exist. Or at least wouldn't exist exactly as it did if that book was ever written. And then Don Powell's Come Back to Sorrento. Again, here you have, I guess, a little view of Midwestern life and how heartbreaking it can be. You know, here you have these people in their lives, and they feel disaffected, and they feel like they missed out, they're not as famous or as popular or successful as they want to be. So when they tell their stories, they embellish, and it kind of gets a little bit crazy after that, you know. But there's something about the time. If you don't understand what's going on at the time, then the book would fall flat. But knowing all the rest enriches it. So we have all, you know, I only have 3 subjects. You can find ways to build in others, absolutely. So we take away all these pieces, and you start to get this blurry picture of what it was like then. But there's still a big glaring centerpiece. Okay? And that's going to be you and your colleagues. Okay? It's up to you guys to put the picture in the focus. And there she is. That's a very famous picture. The migrant mother. And I want to make sure that I give you her name. And I'm thinking of the person who took it. Florence Owens Thompson. Florence Owens Thompson. And she was interviewed, oh man, maybe 10 years ago. And she was still alive. And in her interview, you can hear her talking about how she was from Oklahoma just before the Great Depression. And they traveled out to California to go, pick cotton, dirt farms, so on and so forth. And her husband died. The mother has a baby in her arms too. Can't look at that too long. That's an emotional picture, if you ask me. She worked 16 hours a day for 8.5 years, 7 days a week. There's a story there. That's important. So, in real life, how do we kind of tie all this in, this concept? Well, like I said, the elementary teachers, they have a little bit of an easier time because, again, the classroom is more of their own. They're teaching all these subjects. So, in your case, Angelo, you could have a theme that week, that month. You get as big as you want, or as small as you need to. And you do that. You touch on the history of an era. And then you touch on the science that affected what was going on in the era. And the history, science, literature of that era. Those are easy things. I mean, it's there. All these stories are intertwined. Nothing makes sense on its own. It just doesn't. Secondary people. Here's where it gets a little tricky because you may have to work with your departmental heads, sell them on the idea. Hey, I want to rearrange my curriculum a little bit. But it's not just you. If it's going to really work, you want to kind of get all the departments as close as they can together. And it doesn't have to be exactly the same time. It's not like, all this week, we're all doing this one topic, and we're going to find a way to work it. As long as it's close, relatively, at least within the same semester, I hope, what you're doing is you're building right there. That schema theory. Okay? You're giving the students something to work with. They're going to go, oh, yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Also, that connection comes because, oh, that's why they passed that law. Or, that's why the dust storms. I mean, in the Great Depression, the dust storms were so black and dark and so foreboding that the way they blackened the sky, in the Midwest, chickens would go and roost in the middle of the day. They'd go to sleep. They were fooled. That's amazing. There's a wonderful picture. It's online. You can find it. And this farmer, he bought like farm equipment, like a tractor, like an old tractor, which is kind of funny to see today. And the only caveat was he had to dig it out of the sand because so much had piled on. It was like stones. Same there. So, talk to your department heads. Okay, have a loose outline. Hey, here's what I'm going to cover, and how can we make something that's a little more cohesive? And I would recommend starting with what fits naturally. Don't force anything. If it doesn't fit, no big deal. You still got to teach what you got to teach. I understand. I think everyone understands that. People are going to have to teach what they teach. But there is a great trick, and these are for all my non-English teacher friends, because you'll have an ally immediately go to the English teachers and go, hey, I'm giving out assignments all the time. Can I have a peek at your vocabulary you're teaching this year? And they'll go, why? You don't. Because I'm going to work your vocabulary into my instructions and into my lessons. Because you're doing the same exact thing. You're going to be giving them information in a different context, building up their schema and their understanding. That's easy. I mean, how easy is that? You're going to play with synonyms all day. Big deal. English department will love you. Because when those kids go to test, they're having their content, part of their content, taught for them. Kids aren't even there. They don't have to grade it. Life's good. So, let's do a little bit of playing here. Now, we all have a really large group or anything, so we probably just all turn in and work together, and that's fine. We have different contents. Physics, elementary, right? There's a little bit of everything. A history and language. So international, be creative. And yours is? Okay. Okay, so you're the same with Angelo. It's a little bit of everything in there. That's okay. So you'll see there's a circle chart. I like to keep it simple on the table. Everybody get together, maybe come closer. You can hop over here and turn around a little bit, or if you want to come around. And what we'll do is have you pick a central topic. Like World War I, World War II, it doesn't matter. 60s America, Chernobyl, something I haven't thought of, whatever you like. And put that in the center. And then you'll see it'll look something like this. So if I chose to provide play, I'm going to have a biology class, math, English, history. And then what you want to do is, once you have your represented area, and for my elementary folks, pick something that the others don't have, and that's interesting. And then, find out what's interesting. So, biology. Bubonic plague, transfer of the disease by what? Does anyone remember?
Fleas that were carried on the backs of rats.
Outstanding. Does anyone know how it ties into HIV research? Go ahead. That's good.
There's been research that shows that people who got sick and survived, their descendants now have a greater immunity to HIV.
That's absolutely right. What happened was, it was just a mutation within the population, and mostly in Europe. It's between 10 and 20% of European Caucasians will not get HIV, even when exposed. And it's simply because the proteins on the outside of the cell are shaped differently. So when your HIV virus comes in, you can't find a place to dock on the cell. That's interesting. That's cool stuff. So go ahead and let's see what you guys come up with. I was going to have a thing where we're kind of sharing, but a little bit of a ghost town.
Do you want to divide elementary and secondary, or do you want us to work all together?
Yeah, let's have fun together, because we only have a handful of, or you know what, we can split two groups. Let's do this. Would you mind terribly? Jumping in with them, and we'll do these three?
Okay.
That'd be fantastic. And these three. Okay. And then we have one elementary in each. And we have time, so I mean, you guys, I'd say 5 to 7 minutes. It's ridiculous. I get choked up by that picture.
You get choked up by my picture, my picture.
And they were and they actually helped with so they actually helped with and it actually started the Cold War. So how did it how would you guys go
Ooh, okay. Exciting.
The Germans. Germans and Scandinavians. How do you get it all? Scandinavians are the ones who yeah, but I trained for that. So, I guess, for history, there's all sorts of things we do. Innovations. or just negative countries from the Muslim section. Feudalism, let's just put that into one. Feudalism. Well, I guess because you're it's mostly, like you're talking about this.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And so, and so I think right away you kind of, because some of these things are, this is the math, you know, the enormous geometry, calculus, all those things all play into algorithms, you know, but I noticed they can teach a lot of the things that they used a major in America wasn't really interested in. Yeah. And that's right. So right.
We use a lot of that.
Because some histories too. That causes this.
Vectors.
I mean, you can also look at that.
Like again,
How did they have to, like you said, use the math to develop some of those things? So I think there's also, when you're doing this level, you're definitely
With the moving both the languages and just information, cultures, with
these prime things, what were some of the
things we're thinking here.
some of the drawings
Things that you have to think here.
what were their
Right. Okay, so you have the cost of the Crusades.
especially like this literature.
Which is a lot of through Russia, down to the United States, and that was
Works
so
that
there's a
build
lot. That's a really, which is just not
you want that
language on that.
he was a Nobel Prize winner, and he wrote a lot of poems and things about the war turned out a lot of people felt after the war. So people were killed and stuff like that.
yeah.
And I think definitely,
He's very good.
Just
Relationship between sign and religion.
Yeah.
Sports. And then you've got all of the, you know, that kind of architecture, what did they play?
like there's one which
We're gonna take just one more minute and we'll see where we're at.
they had technology to do beautiful things. It's just hard. We don't think about that, but they did. Water wheels. So cool. So
Oh, yeah, social studies, a lot of this stuff. Well, also the social aspect of them, you know, some of the classes at that time. What, you know, some of the behavior, common behavior, social type of concerns or problems, what some of the social problems that you do, some of the remedies, yeah.
right? That's how I just started.
All right, so
My son's
let's go ahead and see what we came up with. It'll be interesting, I hope. So let's see what they have. We'll start from the back and move our way up. Okay.
Oh, what do you want us to do?
Doctor?
Okay.
So go ahead, give me what was your central topic?
World War II.
Okay, World War II. What do we have? What outside topics? Like what?
Yeah,
disciplines?
science, social studies, math, literature, and arts.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
And so, how did you think you could tie in World War II? And tell me the discipline, and then tell us.
Science, we had different scientists came over from the mainland because of it, just persecution. Which, you know, Einstein, he formed, you know, a lot of his theories. And different other scientists, they helped to develop the atomic bomb, which helped to end World War II, of course. And which the atomic bomb ended up starting Cold War. So it's basically that science, which was developed during World War II, which helped start another Cold War.
Sure.
And,
And yeah, the boom of American physics, right? It's what we have.
right.
Berkeley and so on, because there's a lot of stuff named here. That's cool.
Let's see. We have different philosophy, social studies. Let's see. Different philosophies were developed. Common behavior.
Yeah, I think we were talking about what were they? What were some of the philosophical views then? I didn't go into detail, but we were just and just some of the social policies that were happening and occurring during that time. What were some of the common social issues that were and were the remedies we talked about? So.
And actually, that's a great point, and that leads back into memes as a whole. Just a note, because when you talk about social context, and we're talking about how people find what they feel is important, and so on. That's something that's typically passed down in families and traditions. What does your family find important? Chances are you're going to pass down to your kids, and so that's great. Memes drive that. That's an absolutely perfect example.
It's a way to tie in the individual into the story. And we talked about math. I mean, there's a lot of math involved in physics, and how did they make those, weapons, and how did they come up with those formulas and, those incredible higher level physics.
Yeah, I heard you mention string theory. Did you put that under math or science? Both?
It's actually science, but yes.
You could, right? You can straddle that.
Math and science, of course.
Sure.
It's developed string theory, which is still being.
Yeah. Did you come here to see Michio Kaku? I think it was like Kakao. I don't know how to say his last name. He's like a Japanese American physicist. He was actually here doing a speech maybe 2 Septembers ago, I think. I didn't know where campus was back then. I missed it. I was lost. And did we cover anything else, or
historical?
Literature.
Oh yeah,
Of course, literature, like different authors such as Czeslaw Miłosz, different moral, patriotic things were done.
Okay.
Music, which is arts, which is developed from World War II, and drama and plays were also developed.
What type of plays? What
Okay,
kind
so
of
all things that we could present in different classes that give people a more holistic view of what World War II was about. That's great, man. That was perfect.
Well, and also just a quick comment. My son's charter high school does this.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, every year they pick a theme, and they study every subject studies that theme at some level.
I think it's great.
So, yeah, the Renaissance period, they do a big presentation every November. They do a dinner theater, and the entire school, everyone has a part, and everyone has a job. And there's just everything. Every class does it: the historical, the literature, the arts.
If you can get it school-wide and something like that, fantastic. I'm hoping for even if we just get snippets. You know what I mean? Not even a whole year long. Give me 2 weeks of your lesson plan. Give me a month. Give me the working period. That's cool stuff. What do we get at the front table? What's our topic? Oh, yeah, that's right. The Middle Ages. Okay. And I want to go down the line. Angela, why don't you start? Give me a topic and tell me what you tell us.
She was for history and kind of social studies. We did like the culture of the people, the population,
Okay.
the serfs, and we did like invasions and things like that.
How that kind of affected their lives. The actual invasions themselves under the history. Okay. What did you? Just name one. It doesn't have to be. I'm not saying you wrote it.
Okay, well, you got the history department, which is you got the Viking invasions and trade yards. You have the Norman invasion, feudalism as a construct of society.
Yeah. That's all important pieces. And again, back to the Middle Ages. So you had, which one did you mention? What was your overall topic there?
Oh,
social studies and history.
Just kind of doing it, like naming.
That's good. I'll do it. Give me what you had for the science at the time.
For that one, we had the plague, right? Like how that affects clothes.
Geographic exploration.
Ah, okay. That's a great way to pull it in. Okay, so you just had basically exploration, people looking for areas that are non-affected. Beyond the trade routes, which were getting brutalized at the time. That's cool. What did you have?
Well, I did most of the language, and specifically how Latin evolved into different dialects, and now those are different Romance languages.
Okay.
I also touched on the effects of the bubonic plague, because if it weren't for the plague, they'd still be speaking French in England, at least the upper class. And
I didn't get that. It's interesting.
there are also some interesting things with the literature of the time, and biographies of some of our early writers. The growth of Romance literature is in this time period, Arthuriana, and then you have the war stories, which I saw a little long.
Oh, you definitely are. You have your point of interest there. It's good. So, I mean, does everyone feel that they got an idea of what I was hoping to drive home? If you have a question, or you need anything, you're like, hey, I like the idea of the circle chart. Or you're just like, hey, can you tell me what books you reference? Because I referenced one that was here. Feel free to send me an email. It's just my name, Joe. I could email at nights.uc.edu. I thank you all for coming.
Thank you.